So, um, so what else would you like to say about who you are and what you do and the spiritual path? And
Well, it's interesting. I feel that one of the things that I've been seeing a lot recently, you were talking about just watching what's going on in the world
yeah, being an observer.
and trying to understand, or it's fascinating to see all that. And the thing that I've been thinking about is maybe the most overlooked group in terms of spiritual needs are the people that grew up in the church and are now kind of functionally agnostic atheists.
Mm-hmm.
I met someone the other day, 60-something-year-old Catholic, and he's been very successful in business and calls himself an atheist. And he said he's a spiritual atheist, though. So I looked it up, and there's actually a group, there's a spiritualatheists.com or something. And I think this is actually a really, really interesting group are people that grew up in a tradition, and they may be functionally observing the holidays of the tradition, but the spirituality they have not found it there,
Mm-hmm.
and yet they're incredibly spiritually curious.
Mm-hmm.
And that to me is such a fascinating group. And I think partly because when I was in grad school and I got a PhD in biochemistry, so I was surrounded by a lot of very rational, scientific thinking, kind of atheist, agnostic type people.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm actually very comfortable with them.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm getting excited about how you might talk about spirituality. And again, I think the science of human aliveness, which really works for anyone.
Yeah,
That's what it's
I
about.
love that definition.
I'm not trying to, and I, don't have Jesus in my back pocket, and I'm gonna suddenly switch to trying to sell you on, well, who would it be, Jesus or Buddha, or some combination of them. But I think that's a very overlooked group.
Huh.
And the tradition, the Christian tradition, has so many wonderful mystics that can help people find a whole second or third stage to their spiritual life. One that's more experiential, grounded, grounded in self-liberation, liberation of the own, and development of the knowing sense within. Which, I mean, if that isn't God or Christ in you, I don't know how else to think about that knowing, loving sense or place that's already feels a connection to everything. So I'm excited to see where that might go. Yeah.
Huh. And what is it that you find interesting about that particular group of people?
Well, I think the idea that I could really relate to them. I have so many friends that are basically in that position that, and for me, it goes back to Brother David. When I was with Brother David in '87, I'd pretty much given up on the church, and he showed me, he showed me, and in that moment I realized there was a way that I could understand the inner teaching of the church that was true for me.
Mm.
And so I didn't have to throw it all out. That I could come back and understand what those stories and teachings were really about from the inside, and make a healing connection with my childhood, with that tradition, part of my tradition and culture. And I found that very powerful, even though it didn't mean at all that I became like a nominal Christian in a conventional way, not at all.
Mm-hmm.
But that connection was made.
Yeah. I think I'm starting to understand what you're saying. So somebody that grew up in the church, say the Catholic Church, for instance, and that was a huge part of their childhood and well into their adulthood, and then they somehow disconnected from that or didn't find what they were calling their spirituality in that, to completely close that door and say everything that existed in my life before now is has no meaning behind it?
Mhm.
Well, what you're saying is you can find meaning in that.
I think you can find
Yeah.
meaning in that on your own terms without, and in a way, see, the thing that happens when you hit about 13 or so, to go back to psychology, your formal operations or abstract thinking kick in, and all of a sudden we tend to want to know what we make of all the dogma.
Mm-hmm.
And some of it doesn't really stand up to scientific thinking,
Mm-hmm.
and so we might be tempted to just throw the whole thing out. And then maybe we have kids and we want to raise our kids in the church, so we take them to Sunday school. But for us, it's just kind of more about the good works that the church does and the soup kitchen and the positive values of the church. And what we're missing, and then those folks go to mindfulness or they start practicing Buddhism or something, and which is all fine.
Yeah.
But the thing is that they could find a whole spirituality within the church that addresses exactly what it's like to be in middle age with children and seeking after questions of ultimate meaning and purpose in their lives.
Mm-hmm.
And they could do that, and those could be places where they engage the fullness of their mind, thinking about it, feeling it,
Yeah.
being it in their body.
Yeah.
And that's to me, it's sad if a person isn't able to access that aspect of the religious tradition.
Well, yeah, and it seems like a much healthier way to do something, because anytime you have to cut something off that has been such a big part of your life, that doesn't seem like a healthy way to go to me. And to know, so do you have any intentions or any ideas of how you're going to use your work to include that group?
I not yet.
Maybe there's something forming there.
There's something coming, yeah. I'll let you know when it gets here.
Yeah, because I think that's a huge group of
Yeah.
people in our Western society
Yeah,
that you're talking about there.
Yeah, it is a huge group.
Yeah.
Well, these are the people that read Eckhart Tolle, for one
Mhm,
thing,
right,
And
yeah.
it was a fantastic gift that his work came along.
Mm-hmm.
Adyashanti, I mean, there are many contemporary people that aren't exactly in any tradition,
Right.
and they open up such a wonderful world for people.
Yeah. But I think it would be a wonderful world as well to make the connection of Christian tradition and the gifts that are in that could be explored, instead of just wiped away as if they aren't meaningful today. They are meaningful today.
Yeah, there's no reason that we have to give the conservative Christians the only valid understanding or interpretation of what the whole religion is about.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to say the conservative view is valid, it has its own truth to it, but it's not the whole picture.
Mm-hmm.
And there are many ways to understand those teachings and truths that go well beyond that.
Yeah. Aren't there, it's not often talked about or kind of out in the same light as an Eckhart Tolle, but aren't there a lot of Christian mystics that are just kind of forgotten about and not really...
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And here was Lama Surya Das, maybe the senior American Lama, Buddhist Lama in the U.S., quoting the mystics at the talk last weekend, and Julian of Norwich, quoting Julian of Norwich, who's a great female saint of the Catholic Church and with many teachings that are useful for us today. And yeah, no, absolutely. And even in the U.S. right now, I could name a handful of really profound mystics that are all Catholic monks. Cynthia Bourgeot, who's Episcopalian, David Steindl-Rast, Thomas Keating. These are all people, although they generally present in Christian language, these are all people that have seen through to the core of the nature of reality, and their teaching reflects that. And so just because they're saying God, Jesus, Holy Spirit, it's not by any means the same understanding that a more conventional teacher would be coming from.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It would be nice. I'll be interested to see
Yeah.
what comes from you
Yeah,
in,
me
in
too.
that area. So just a couple more things, Bill, before we close. If you're open to it, would you like to talk a little bit about, let's see, you called it Trillium Awakening?
Yeah, Trillium Awakening. Trillium Awakening is a school of embodied awakening that I've been in for about 5 years. And Trillium it's a path to embodied awakening, and it's also a community of people that are living in community, living that awakening in a loosely affiliated community. I don't mean living in one place,
Right.
but we support each other in our awakened life.
And that's what makes it a community.
That's a sense
Connection
in
and
which it's
support.
a community, yeah. And it's interesting. It's kind of, for some people, like a finishing school of their spiritual path. So a lot of people I found Trillium after a few decades of arduous seeking on my path since '87. And I found it and felt that this was surely the right thing for me, and found the teacher and called the teacher up and had one session by, I think, phone, and had my awakening during the first session.
Oh, wow.
So I just, all the preparatory work had just made me ready for a few prompts, and I dropped into it.
Mhm.
So there are a few pointers or guidelines in Trillium Awakening, one of the most important being just to constantly affirm that Spirit is within you and is presently active in transforming you almost inevitably toward your awakening. So to affirm that and to see your ongoing process as in some way that's what's going on here.
Whether
Through
you're
that.
conscious of it or not.
Whether you're fully conscious of it or not.
Mhm.
Because some of the turns you might be invited to take on the path might not seem like, what Father would have told you when you were a child going to church or something.
Mhm.
But that might be exactly the path for you.
Mhm.
And so I'm currently in the process to become a mentor and then a teacher of that work.
And how did you describe it? Embodied awakening?
So there are three distinctions in Trillium. The one is to awaken to realization of our vast unlimited consciousness, our participation in the vast unlimited consciousness of the cosmos. So I'm one with everything, and I feel my participation in everything. The second is that the place where we experience that is in our body. So this isn't it isn't a more dissociative kind of awakening where you go up into the light or go in here to the light and find it there, but then you're just at war with everything in your body. No, we find that all the emotions and the drives of the body are just another face of spirit. And then the third aspect of it is the communal experience, or communal has a different meaning. The relationship piece, which says that in our interactions with teachers and with each other, we own our own perspective, but we respect other people's differing perspectives with great respect. So if a teacher were to say something that I felt offensive and that didn't ring true for me, then the teacher would, out of respect for my perspective, possibly even apologize. So rather than the kind of old style top-down, I'm more enlightened than you, so I know better, it really profoundly honors each person's inner knowing. And in fact, the honoring each other's inner knowing, the spirit within or God within, is one of the keys to awakening, to helping a person awaken, because that's there, that knowing sense is there, And when we reflect it back to another person, we're helping them to own it and grow into it. We're encouraging it to come forward in a society that so often just wants to squash it.
Yeah, I was just thinking, well, what else better to change the world than something like that? That's really something that's missing. And it's almost like being mirrors.
Yes, it's being a mirror for the other person,
Yeah.
and sometimes having a word to say as well. But
Yeah.
in my work, the main thing I do is, since I'm not you, I can see I can see whoever I'm working with from a slightly different perspective that they themselves can probably never actually quite get to. So that's a huge value. And then to see, I'm fighting with myself about I should really be flossing my teeth more, or I should really be earning more money than I am, or whatever it is. And these are big battlegrounds. So
Yeah.
it helps to bring in another person to just say, wow, you're dealing with a lot here. And let me tell you, your income is actually sounds pretty good to me, or whatever it would be. But to help reflect back the noble battles that we're fighting, and our own wisdom which is coming forth.
Yeah. And then we're all in this mothership together, so may as well be there for each other and compassionate to each other and mirrors for each other and respect each other.
Yeah, and it's such a different move than the old style Eastern spirituality, which was rigidly hierarchical and in a way that really was effacing of the junior members. To say, the newest person here may have the best solution to our problem, so let's invite all the perspectives to the party.
Something you said you say on your website, which really stood out to me, and I don't know exactly how you say it, but that, here it is. I have not sought awakening for myself alone, but for our mutual benefit. I believe that each of us has our own path to walk with its unique challenges and rewards, but on another level we are all collaborating in that great work of our time, the healing and evolution of human society. And that really stood out to me, because I think there's confusion in that area too, that, your spiritual journey, your spiritual path is yours and yours alone. I do think that we do it for ourselves as we do it for each other. And it is a collaborative thing, and an evolving of the human condition.
Yeah, I completely agree. And other people's challenges always inspire me. It inspires me to see what people are able to, the obstacles they're able to live with and overcome, and their sacrifices and victories. So yeah, I think it's an individual quest, but it's an individual connected to everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think, it's more fun to share with other people.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, what good is, an enlightened state if that's not something you then go out and share with others?
But see, that's what the separate ego thinks. It wants to, get a bunch of goodies, go trick-or-treating, and go back home and hide in the closet with its chocolates. And then maybe come out to receive the adulation of the crowd. And it's just not like that.
Yeah. And so thank you so much for bringing a lot of clarification in this interview today. I really appreciate it, Bill, and it has been an enlightening conversation for me, and I'm sure it will be for anybody who chooses to watch this video. So.
Thank you so much, Irma. It's really been a pleasure to be with you today.